Hi, JCC Columbus. This is Carly Snyder, your fitness director, and we are the J Initiative program for wellness, and we have a special guest today to talk to us about goals. This guest happens to be my uncle as well. His name is Dr. Kevin Wildenhaus. And he's going to tell us a little bit about what he does. And basically, our talk today is how to set achievable goals, whether it be for fitness or health or nutrition or financial, and how to achieve those goals. So 2021 will be a lot better year for hopefully all of us than 2020. So, Dr. Kev,
Yeah,
thank you again for doing this for me and for the JCC. You have a pretty cool job. You have a scientist job, and then you have like a really, really cool job. Your scientist job is at Johnson and Johnson, and your other job is to be a team psychologist for some professional sports team. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
sure. Nice to be with you, Carly, and with the JCC. This is a great topic and one that I have a lot of passion for. So thanks for the invite. My main job is with Johnson and Johnson, as you mentioned. I'm a research scientist, and we're working in the area of healthcare. And we're really trying to change the paradigm because today we really have what we call disease care. We wait for people to get sick, we diagnose, and then we treat them. And what we want to do is to move ahead of that curve and look at diseases like type 1 diabetes, certain cancers, maternal mental health issues. We want to get in front of that and try to prevent the disease from happening in the first place, or at the very least, slow down the progression. So I work in type 1 diabetes. I work in perinatal depression, and my main role is working in the lung cancer space around smoking cessation. But my cool job, like you talked about, is for 20 years now, I've been the team psychologist for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's a great job. The role that I predominantly play is to evaluate players for the NFL draft and to write reports, conduct psychological evaluations and testing, do clinical interviews, and basically write reports and make recommendations on the players that we draft. And then after we draft them, write reports on the players that we bring in to help them adjust to the NFL on and off the field and help the coaches understand the best way they learn, their learning style, what motivates them, helping them to set goals, those sorts of things. And I've done something very similar now with the Pittsburgh Penguins of the NHL for the last 3 years. So those are my cool jobs.
Those are super cool jobs. Do you see a lot of them, like, do you talk to them one-on-one, in any format like that, like more of like a counselor setting, or is it kind of all that stuff you do in the beginning for the team and drafting?
Yeah, I work with a few players each year, off the field or off the ice, but most of my role is related to the draft. I'm not in Pittsburgh. We have a network of providers. I work very closely with the team psychiatrist and their mental health practitioners for any services that we need to offer. But I'm available for consultation. I used to do a lot of one-on-one sports psych work with PGA professionals, with Major League Baseball, college basketball teams, soccer teams, but now my main role is just working with the Steelers and the Penguins.
Cool. Well, we brought you on to talk about goal setting because athletes have to obviously set goals, and I knew you were an expert with dealing with professional athletes and their mental state. Why do you think setting goals are so important?
Yeah, good question. Basically, we are inquisitive, curious creatures by nature. It's in our DNA. We naturally strive to achieve, to develop, to grow. Just look at a baby. A baby doesn't have to be told about goal setting. They naturally pursue developing new skills, learning new things, being very persistent in their efforts, not taking failure personally. They learn to crawl and to walk. They develop motor skills. They develop language. And that's with us from birth. Abraham Maslow has his hierarchy of needs, as many people know from your college psych classes. And at the top of that is self-actualization. It's the idea of maximizing what we're capable of becoming. And so it's inherent in who we are. But the problem happens that unfortunately many people, I think, lose their way. And they don't really focus on their future. They don't focus on their goals, and they kind of wander around a little aimlessly in life. And one of the ways to think about this, I always talk to my clients, is the story of Alice in Wonderland. And if you remember, Alice gets lost and she's disoriented and she meets the Cheshire Cat. And she says, excuse me, but could you help direct me and tell me, please, where I should go from here? And the cat says, well, that depends on where you want to go. And she says, well, I really don't care where. And he said, well, in that case, it really doesn't matter which way you go. And Lewis Carroll, who wrote that, is often credited with the quote that if you don't know where you're going, any road will do. And I think too often in life, that's the metaphor for what happens to us is we kind of lose our way, we lose our goals, and we lose our sense of purpose and direction. And so what I like to do is to work with athletes and individuals to help them reestablish their goals and understand what's really important in their lives. And when you think about that, Carly, there really are four kind of domains or areas of what I call well-being. There's certainly health-related well-being. There's mental or cognitive well-being. There's emotional well-being, and my background is as a psychologist. And then there's spiritual well-being. And people need to understand all four of those are important and to identify ways that they can maximize their self to be what they want to become by looking at all four of those. But then more specifically than that, people have goals in a lot of areas. In the work that you and I do, it's often health, but people can have goals with regard to finances or their careers or their relationships, their family, spirituality, personal growth, philanthropy and altruism to do for others, and fun and recreation to make sure that they have joy in life. So really understanding where people can focus their energies and what types of things are important to them really help to establish the power of goals. And we started off talking about the fun stuff I do in pro sports. When I was a little boy growing up in Little Fort Jennings, Ohio, with 500 people, no stoplights, I had a goal, a very powerful goal as a young boy that said I was going to be the first kid from my town to ever make it to the pros. And I did, not as an athlete, but as a psychologist. So goals do come true. You got to stick with them.
I thought it was very interesting what you said, is that you have to have goals. Your goals should be health, mental, emotional, and spiritual.
Yep.
And because of my career as a fitness, like I always think fitness, health, like what am I going to accomplish this year in that world, and not and kind of neglect the other things. But as you said, it's like important to be like a well-rounded person and set goals in all of those topics, which I wrote down because I think that's a very good takeaway. Is because I definitely think that we pick one thing to focus on and then just like hyper focus on it and kind of forget the rest of it. And then you get frustrated. So, you gave us a lot of information. How do we get started setting goals? What's a good way to start?
Yeah. One of the things I like to do is to ask people to reflect on the following question. And that is, when I think about my life, what is it that I really want? Now, that's kind of a deep philosophical question, but it's more than just a surface level, I want to lose 20 pounds or I want to get in good shape, because it really does take those domains and those categories I just talked about into consideration or into focus. And when somebody tells me what they really want, then I kind of drill down into a series of what I call why questions. So I'll give you an example. Had a person who said to me, I want to get a promotion at work. That's my goal. And I said, okay, great. Why do you want to get a promotion at work? And they said, well, so that I can earn more money. And I said, and why is it important for you to earn more money? And they said, well, because I want to save up to buy a house. And I said, okay, and why is it important, or why is it something that you want to do to buy a house? And they said, well, I'm starting a young family and I want to be able to provide stability for my family. And I said, why do you want to do that? And they said, because growing up, I never had that stability, and I want to make sure that I have that for my kids. Now, think about with just a simple series of why questions, how somebody went from wanting a promotion to really getting at the heart of who they are and what they're about and what's really important to them in their lives. So that's one way to go about it. Another strategy is to go back to the Alice in Wonderland story and think of goals and to think about what you want to accomplish in life as a journey, as a trip. And so I always say to people, there are four questions that you need to answer for yourself. The first question is, where do I want to go? Now that's the goal question. Where do I want to go? What's my destination? Where do I want to get to? The second question you always have to ask on a journey is, okay, if that's where I want to get to, where am I today? So you need to do a self-assessment of where you're at, whether that's literally where you're at in life, whether that's figuratively, whether that's spiritually, whether that's in your health, etc. You need to find out where you are today to know from how do I get from here to there. The third thing, and one we'll talk more about, which I think is the most overlooked, is the third question is, how do I get there? What's my map? What's my GPS? What's my sense of direction? What are the steps I need to take to get to where I want to go? And then the final thing you need to ask yourself periodically as you're on the pursuit of that journey is, how am I doing? You need to stop and reassess how you're tracking toward your goals, whether they're still important to you, whether they're still within reach, whether you're being consistent in those steps that you're taking to try to achieve it. And so when you ask those four questions, you can learn a lot about yourself, and you can realize, I also tell people, if you get on an airplane in LA and you're flying to New York City, and that airplane gets up in the air and tracks toward New York City, but it's 1 degree off of the direction, it's going to end up in Boston. And so planes often, when they're in the air, oftentimes through the computer system, are constantly recalibrating their path. In the end, they get to where they want to go, but they realize that they're often slightly off course, just like we are when we think about setting goals and trying to achieve them. So this calibration idea of going back and assessing, is this really what I want? How am I doing? Is my plan working? Am I on track? I just got a detour. How do I get back on the highway? These are really important questions to ask.
Yeah, I just wrote them down for myself. I think I think they are really good questions that, I haven't gone about my yearly goal setting. Yeah, so I wrote down where and how to assess. I think those are great questions and good starting point.
Cool.
Like, I think if people get ahead of themselves when they make goals, I mean, in my industry, it happens all the time. Like, I'm going to run every day for a month, or I'm doing this challenge, and I'm not, set very extreme goals that sometimes I feel are unachievable, but, it's who am I to say that you can't do something if you really want to put your mind to it.
Yeah.
What's the best way to make achievable goals so you don't feel like down about yourself or get frustrated, like setting things that like are unachievable,
Yeah,
or
definitely.
high, I should say.
Yeah, definitely is a problem for a lot of people. So let me give you a 5-step process that I think can really help people to set achievable goals. The first one, and you highlighted this, is that the goal, frankly, needs to be simple. It needs to be clear so everybody knows exactly what that goal is. There's no ambiguity. It needs to be reachable or achievable. And then it also needs to be relatively small. So to your point, somebody may come to you and say, Carly, I want to run a marathon. And you say, okay, that's great. How much are you running now? And they say, well, I can run down to the end of the block, but then I have to stop. And so that person might have a long-term goal of a marathon, but the short-term goal has to frankly be much more modest than that. Maybe it's to run to the end of the block and then walk a block and then run a block and walk a block. So those smaller, simple, straightforward goals eventually get you there. The second thing is that people need to track their progress. You need to start developing a relationship with your goals because they need to be with you every day. So whether that's on a mirror in the bathroom, whether that's something you write on your tennis shoes when you work out, it's something that you might look at in your journal every morning before you do your meditation. These are things that you need to live and breathe and keep close at hand. You can't just say them and then ignore them and not have visual cues. You need to track your progress. Get a calendar, and every day that you run to the end of the corner and you do it successfully, you make a nice big X. Small things, but people like checklists. They like to understand that they've done something meaningful. They like to see their progress. The third thing is you have to assess your environment. So I'll get people who will say to me that they want to eat healthy and change their nutritional habits. And I say to them, if I walked into your house right now and I went into the kitchen, would I find blueberry muffins next to the coffee maker or a bowl of fresh fruit? If I open your cupboards, would I see healthy, nutritious foods or would I see all sorts of chips and snacks? So your environment, what you see in front of you each day, can play a big role, as well as your environment in terms of the people you hang with, the people that you associate with. We'll come back to that and the importance of your social network and your social environment. The fourth thing is that you need to reward yourself for the process and the effort. Whether that's just a pat on the back, whether that's giving yourself a luxury of getting a Starbucks after you come back home from the gym, you need to do something to reward yourself, because it's really important to understand that when we set these goals, especially health goals, we don't see the results right away. And people can get very, very frustrated. And so you need to find ways to encourage and reward yourself very, very quickly and immediately after you've engaged in the desired behavior. And then the final thing, which I think is the real key to all of this, you need to change your health habits or your finance habits or your work related habits. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. One of my favorite quotes of all time is from Aristotle, who said, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is merely a habit." And so we have to create healthy habits. Many of us have very unhealthy habits, or we have inconsistent behaviors. We don't truly ingrain them in our day to day activities and lives, and that undermines our ability to reach our goals.
That kind of leads right into my next question is like, what are some mistakes people make when they're setting goals? I mean, you gave us like really good, like starter, like I said, I'm taking notes for myself when, but changing habits and tracking progress calendars says
Yeah,
it, and then rewarding. What are the mistakes that people make besides setting goals too big, let's say,
yeah.
because that's kind of, I think that's a pretty common mistake, but what are some
Yeah.
other things that people do?
That's number one on the list. So you got number one. The second thing is that the goals tend to not be clear. Whether they're too audacious or not, they're also vague. And so the more clear you can make them, the better. And one phrase that you need to remember when it comes to goal setting is clarity equals power. There's power in having clearly defined goals that you want to achieve. The next thing is that a lot of people like to secretly procrastinate, and they do it by saying, I need to learn more before I can actually engage in the behavior. So I'm going to read up on nutrition, or I'm going to read a finance book, or I'm going to read a relationship building course. All of those things are fine, but people confuse knowing and understanding with doing. And there's no substitute for the doing. A lot of people, they'll read a good self-help book and they never apply it. Or they'll read a finance book and then they never make the changes that are recommended in the book. So that's the second mistake. I talked about the fact that they don't establish habits. I think that's the third one. And I got a couple of ideas for your audience in terms of how you can go about establishing some good habits that I thought I would bring up now.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So one is called habit stacking. And the nice way to think about this is, imagine there's a behavior that you want to do every day. I'll just make one up. Let's say you want to start meditating 10 minutes a day every day. And right now you're not doing it at all. What I would say to you is, let's think about your daily routine that you currently have and the habits that you currently do on a daily basis without fail. People, I say, make a list and they'll say, well, what do you do every day? I get up out of bed, I brush my teeth, I take a shower, I make a cup of coffee, etc. And so I say, okay, we need to pair the meditation with something you're doing every day. So an example would be, what if every day you make your cup of coffee, which you sit down and drink in your favorite chair, and immediately when you finish that last drop of coffee, you go to a quiet spot, you put on your headphones, and you do 10 minutes of Headspace or Calm or a related meditation app. So you pair a behavior that you're already doing every day with a new behavior that you want to institute. Now, there's a flip on this that's kind of cool, because some people will not have the willpower, as they say, to follow through on that. They'll know that they should, but they don't want to. And so this is a behavioral technique called the Premack principle. And what it would say is, you just flip that on its head. So the new rule then for those people is that when you get up in the morning, you can't have that first cup of coffee until you've done 10 minutes of meditation. So you put the meditation first, and that leads you to go to the behavior of drinking that cup of coffee, because that may be a powerful motivator for the person. So those are two examples of how you would go about establishing some habits. You pair the habit frequency up with what you might frequently do. You may, go to synagogue once a week, or you may do something else on a weekly basis. And if you have a once a week behavior, you pair it with that. And so the frequency has to be the same. When people kind of make mistakes and they're not following through, the other thing that tends to get in the way is, as I said, they don't reward themselves. And that reward could be they don't really like walking, but they do like putting on headphones and listening to a podcast, or they love to have audiobooks, or they might just listen to Pandora. So put on your headphones and listen to a podcast while you walk for 45 minutes on the treadmill. And so you're pairing a desired behavior with something that you need to incorporate, and that's also rewarding to you because it's something that's enjoyable. So those are some things that are mistakes people make and some strategies that they can use to overcome them.
I was thinking about rewarding because that's the one thing I've not really brought up. It's like if I do something when I think, okay, I'm going to eat really healthy for a week, my reward is to have ice cream, but that's kind of counterintuitive to what you're trying to do. So, like, how do you figure out what reward is still in line with your goals? I was thinking, okay, like, what if I'll go shopping, I'll get a new dress or something like
Right.
that. But let's say I don't necessarily think those are always in line. And I don't really, when I make goals, I don't think about rewarding myself.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you have any ideas with that, but
Yeah.
how to make sure that those are in line with what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, it's a really good question, because sometimes the goal or the reward is the opposite of what you're trying to achieve, to your point.
Yeah.
You're trying to lose weight and you reward yourself with a Starbucks or an ice cream. Um, and so a couple things. One is that part of the reward is just documenting when you've done something well, because that's reinforcing just to see it on paper that I've done this 5 days in a row. Second thing, it might sound a little silly, but as an athlete, I always tell people we have this private voice, this inner coach that's always talking to us. It's always judging, it's always evaluating, it's usually telling us when we mess up and when we didn't do something well. And that voice has to become your best friend rather than your worst enemy. They have to be the best coach you ever have rather than the worst. So another way to reward yourself is simply to say, way to go. That was a good job. You should be proud of yourself today. You got your butt out of bed and you exercised. A third type of reward can be a social reward. So maybe it's that you spend 15 minutes on Facebook, or that you do a social media and you look at Pinterest on something you're interested in. That can be a reward that doesn't undermine your health. If you do choose to give yourself something that is rewarding or reinforcing in terms of food, for example, there's a difference between eating a pint of ice cream and having one big scoop and showing some willpower and discipline, where you say, I rewarded myself, but I did it under control. Or one piece of chocolate candy, a Lynch chocolate, for example, rather than 5 or 6 pieces or a big candy bar. So there's a way to do it in moderation. Over time, the behavior becomes reinforcing itself, and you like doing it for just the sake of doing it. But in the short run, again, you might have to understand that a little bit of behavior that undermines your long-term goal is okay. The other nice thing about that is it tells you don't have to be perfect. It's not like I can never have a piece of chocolate again, or it's never, it's not like I can't ever have a macchiato. You can do certain things that are rewarding because, you're human after all, and you can't be perfect, nor should you be expected to be. I think the other type of reward that you can give yourself is this idea of what I call an accountability partner. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier. If imagine that it's you're going to get up at 6 a.m. tomorrow, Carly, and you're going to run, all right, outside. Well, the alarm goes off at 6 o'clock, and it's really cold outside, and it's snow on the ground, and the bed is nice and warm, and it just is so easy to just roll over and go back to sleep, right? But imagine the night before you talked to your best friend and you said, "Hey, I'll see you at the park at 6:15 tomorrow morning and we'll run together." Now, if you do that one simple thing where you develop an accountability partner and you've got skin in the game and he or she has skin in the game, both of you are much more likely to show up. And when you do, that social connection is actually very rewarding and very reinforcing. And so there are those kind of tricks that I think and techniques that are important. That's why some group efforts, community efforts like the work that you do, working out with personal trainers, is really powerful because there becomes an accountability factor that you miss when you're doing something just on your own.
That's the first thing I thought of when you said accountability partner, because I think as a trainer, you become that role in so many people's life, and also they have not only they have to show up for you, they have money in the game, So like there's
Absolutely.
multiple things happening
Right.
besides to make you do that, and I think even like you said, having a social partner or friend would make me much more likely to do something and try to not weasel my way out of it if I had to show up for somebody else.
Yeah.
Um, We talked a lot about like setting goals, how to set it goals, rewarding. What happens, like what do you tell your clients and athletes when they get stuck or having a hard time accomplishing a goal that they set for themselves?
Yeah. I think that you have to step back and look at one of three things. Is the goal lacking clarity or is it unreachable? And it's basically too much for them. Is the problem that the goal is achievable, but they haven't established those good habit patterns? Or is the fact that they said that they really like a goal and they're motivated by it, but they're really not? So they're kind of given the college try. They're saying this is what I really want, but they haven't truly committed to it. Those are the three big things that I think get in the way of people with the goals that they set. And so those are the first three places I try to look for a problem and a potential solution.
And then just, you mean like if they're stuck based on those questions, maybe does the person need to evolve their goal or maybe get rid of, like, come up with something else? How
Yeah.
would I apply this?
Yeah. So one way to look at it is to say, right now, for whatever reasons, you have this goal, but frankly, something about the goal, it's not important enough to you to follow these habits and get these things in place. So let me ask you a question. What would have to happen for it to suddenly become important enough to you? If it's a health goal, would it have to be something, for example, where you were diagnosed with a condition or you realized you couldn't get up a flight of steps or somebody that you cared about got sick or you reached a certain weight and you said, I can't do this anymore? What would be the threshold that would get you over the hump? I also might ask them on a 1 to 10 scale, how motivated are you to achieve this goal? Be very, very honest. And they might say, well, in truth, it's only a 5. And I'll say, what number would it have to get to for you to get out of bed and do that exercise tomorrow, or meet with a financial planner, or talk to your boss about your career path? And they said, does it have to be a 10? And they said, no, I don't need a 10 in motivation. If I got to a 7, that would be enough to put me over the edge. I say, okay, great. You're at a 5. We only need to get you 2 spaces to a 7. How can we go about that? What can we do to get you from a 5 to a 7? And so sometimes I'll talk in what's called a motivational interviewing approach, where we ask people to understand just how motivated or confident they are and address those two issues to kind of get them over the hump to take that initial action and move forward. And then again, as I said, sometimes it means making more modest goals and starting a little bit simpler and building them up more slowly.
Thank you. And now that I'm thinking about it, I think I might need some mental counseling after this to go through my goals and how to set goals.
Yeah.
But these are great tips. So it's New Year's resolution time. That's all you hear in the gym, all over Facebook, social media, and people set so many different goals. How do you help those who have a hard time choosing what goals to prioritize? Because I know that you said those 4 things are important. Do you think each of those, between health, mental, emotional, and spiritual, should have one goal of each? Is there a number? Like, how do you kind of, tell your clients to decipher what they should focus on?
Yeah. Especially. Oh, I'm catching the bite. Do you hear that echo?
I don't hear it.
Okay. I guess it's just me. So the first thing that I would say is that when people try to set New Year's resolutions, they often set too many of them. So the simple answer to the question is to say to yourself, of all the goals that I want to achieve, which one is best at helping me to become the person I most want to be? Can you hear that now, Carly?
You think it's because other people in my house are watching it?
I'm not sure. It just popped up unexpectedly. So
Craig, get off.
So
they can watch it afterwards.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, even though it's in my earphones. Yeah.
So I think Rachel said that she's hearing an echo too.
No, I've had headphones in.
Okay.
I don't hear it. If it's too distracting, we can cut. I mean, you've given us a lot of information.
Well, let me just finish with one thing, echo or not. Okay. Oh, there, that's better. Can you still hear me?
Well, this whole time.
Okay, great. I think we're back. So, when it comes to the New Year's resolution, I think you asked about, right? Okay.
How to help those prioritize? Yeah, like with New Year resolutions and goals, how do you prioritize it?
I always get a kick out of New Year's resolutions because maybe not so much this year because of COVID and the pandemic, but people will say, oh, my New Year's resolution is I'm going to eat healthy, I'm going to lose weight, I'm going to exercise, I'm going to get in the best shape of my life. And then New Year's Eve, they go out to a big party, they eat a huge dinner, they eat food all night long, they drink too much, they stay up late, they wake up late the next day, they feel hungover and terrible, they lie around all day watching football games and eating leftover holiday pie. And then they go, oh, you know,
Yeah, that's exactly what happened over here.
yeah, okay. So I tell people you don't really have a plan. You don't really have a recovery for when you make mistakes. And you don't really have any mercy on yourself for being human and making mistakes. So the first thing I'd say is probably not the best time to make a resolution is at New Year's because you always get yourself off on the wrong foot. Start on December 27th on Brett's birthday. Start some other time, right? And do it in a place where you're not going to get disrupted immediately. But if you do get off track and you're worried, what I was saying earlier is take all the goals you identify for yourself and you say, which one of these goals will best enable me to be the person I most want to become? And if you start with that goal, you'll find that it trickles down and starts to generalize to other areas of your life. So that's how you prioritize the major goal is what's going to help me be the person I want to become. Focus on that one, and then over time you can build in the others.
Well, we're about to wrap up. I really appreciate it. Out of you gave us great information today. If there are 3 pieces of advice, just pick 3 things that we can take away. What would they be?
Yeah, this is an important one. Everybody hated 2020. We're all happy that it's over. We're all excited about 2021 and a fresh start. And there is light at the end of the tunnel with vaccines and treatments, more effective treatments coming. But what I would say to people is I actually think it's a mistake to forget about 2020 and to think it's going to be miraculously better at the beginning, at least, of 2021, because we actually have some lessons to be learned when it comes to our goals and what's important, given what happened to us. And the big thing, again, is that we felt a loss of control in our lives. So if there are 3 pieces of advice of what we can learn from 2020, the first one is the importance of our health and the health of our loved ones, family, friends, and others. And to know that our health can be taken from us very quickly without much warning helps us to realize why it's so important to take care of ourselves. The second lesson, I think, is that when the pandemic hit and people couldn't go to work and people couldn't travel and they couldn't do entertainment, they lost the ability to get into healthy habits and routines. And so we all started to get kind of lazy, or the tendency was to isolate and develop a lot of bad habits. And habits are really important, which I've emphasized today. And the third thing is that when this happened, we started to become socially isolated from family and friends. So the message I think for 2021 is re-emphasize the importance of your health and well-being, re-emphasize the importance of good daily habits and routines, especially until we get out of this and people can get back to functioning and going to work and going out to dinner and going to the movies and doing things. And then the third thing is to remember how important these relationships are, whether it's families or neighbors or friends, and not only do your best to cultivate them in this limited time, but make sure you work to build a healthy social support network when we're able to get back together again. If you take away those 3 messages from 2020, there's a lot of value to be captured from a very tough year for all of us.
Some great advice, and I really appreciate you taking your time to do this for the JCC of Columbus. And I hope you have a great 2021. I'm sure you've set some great goals for yourself, and I am going to take all my notes that I took
Good.
and make my own goals because I haven't even as a trainer, I'm really not good at that. So I appreciate all the information. And thanks for joining us.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot. Take care. Happy New Year.